And we are live. Welcome to episode number 6 of the 667 experience, where we talk about six packs, six figures, and Sabbath. My name is Shane Carling. I am your co host along with Jordan Rouse. And Jordan and I are a good couple of buddies, and we like to talk about every subject known to man. And we're the two kind of guys that like to jump down the rabbit hole and really get into stuff. And so we're excited to talk about tonight. We're going to be talking about sanity in the midst of chaos. And Jordan, why don't you tell everyone, first of all, what made you decide to come up with that title? And let's just do a little bit of a subtitle on what we're going to be talking about here.
Yeah, well, let's talk about a little bit. The world's kind of going insane right now. I think that that, I know that everything is on fire in the United States. And so people have lost their semblance of what sanity is. They lost common respect. They're lighting stores on fire. They're doing all these things. And I don't think there's anything that can quell that right now. And I think there's a lot of tipping points that have occurred lately. I think it all starts with COVID. I think this has been a big thing, locking people indoors. People are very anxious, and then something comes up, just like this hate crime that this cop did, and that was just the tipping point. And stuff like that. When that happens, you got a very polarized society, which is already very infringed upon. And then it was like a spark on what it was already dry kindling and gasoline, and the fire just went up.
Yeah.
And so in these moments, as a person, no matter what race you are, what creed you are, what culture you are, what beliefs you have to decide if you're going to be a person of peace or a person of chaos. You have to choose what you think the answer is. And that's a big part of what I thought the title was. Like, who do you want to be known as? Do you want to be known as someone who showed wherewithal to do the right thing? And I don't think destroying people's property in any sense is a good thing. I don't think that rioting against these things makes much sense. And like it's they call it protest, but like when you're flipping over and lighting on cop cars, storming stations and burning down stores, that's not protesting. That's destruction.
So,
And
well, hold on there, Jordan, because like I get the narrative you're spilling down right now, and I totally get it. And right, people should learn how to protest peacefully, but but I think that like probably 95 or 99% or more, actually maybe 99.999% who go to any of these protests are going with peaceful intentions. But I think that I think there's a lot of political agenda going on right now. I think there's a lot like insurgents placed in there. I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of very extreme ideologues and ideologies at battle here. There's more to meets the eye than just protests, than just COVID and stuff like that. Like right now, the world is in a battle of crazy agendas and crazy sorts of schemes and control mechanisms. I mean, there's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of things that are going on in the world right now. And so you're right. We have this opportunity right now to choose. How do we want to show up in the light of creation and creating a new world? How do we want to build it? Do we want to build a new world with the same old destructive patterns that created our current world? Is that basically what you're saying?
well, here it is. Like the narrative that I adhere to as a person is that an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. The first step to living a peaceful life, like if you have a war between families, for example, we all know the story of the Montagues and the Capulets, Romeo and Juliet. And violence breeds more violence, and it's the oldest narrative in the history of mankind. It really, really is. And so what I would say is, to go to our next level as human beings, we have to be able to forgive. We have to be able to see reason and realize that, yes, there are hateful people in the world, but the best way to meet hate is with love, with peaceful, representations of what that is. And destruction will lead to more destruction, will lead to more rules. It will lead to things like martial law. No one wants to see that.
Dude, it's already
That
happening. They're already there's like a curfew set for LA right now. A super like I mean I have friends in LA and it's really weird because I haven't talked to them in a little while. I should catch up. But I heard that they just issued like a curfew for people living in LA and many other cities. And so where these violent protests broke out, they just basically had martial law enacted, right? And again, I don't think that was the intention of people going to protest. And I get that there's so much pent up anger and that it's not an easy fix and that something does have to be done because the crime that happened was absolutely outrageous.
was egregious.
It
Yes.
was agreed. Yeah, it was like horror. I wish I could unsee that. I don't know why I watched the whole thing. You know, it's an awful situation. And so something does have to be done about that.
Well,
But you see the same pattern unfold where people choose to act out in violence. But the other thing is that what I've seen is that the peaceful protests don't necessarily always get stuff done either. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting situation to observe and see what kind of outcome is going to be created out of this.
it depends. So let's look at a peaceful protest that worked and in large. And we look at India and we look at Gandhi and we look at the independence from Britain. Okay. And in large, they were met with military action and they stayed peaceful because their leader of that movement was peaceful, right? The civil rights movement, for the most part, was peaceful on the African American side, because they had a leader who was peaceful, and he paid with his life for that. But that he brought forward that message that we have to meet it with love, we have to meet it with temperance, we have to meet it with joy. So Martin Luther King Jr. was like that exact embodiment of what I think a courageous, godly individual looks like in these times of crisis. And you got to ask populations that look at people like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King Jr., what would these men, right, think of, these great leaders think of, like these men in the streets right now doing what they're doing? Well, we know what they'd say. We know what their heart would be to these moments. And it's so easily, when we forget the past, we're doomed to repeat it. And these are the messages of history, the annuals of time, and they're going to repeat themselves. So we know what happens next. And just don't get drawn too down the rabbit hole with this. It's there's this speech that was given at one of these turning point examples in the States. And this one lady stood up and said about how, hey, not everyone in a certain populace is a radical, but then the lady that was debating up front said, yes, but it's not the majority that matters. The majority of people can be peaceful, but in Nazi Germany, only 10% of the population was radical, but the vast majority were silent. The minority dictated the future there, and then the entire place got lit up by fascism because the vast minority, the little minority, was fascist, and then the country became it. So we have to be very, very cognizant of the flickers of these things that happen, because it's like a snowball effect. And then people start choosing sides. And once they start choosing this tribe, they have to adhere to the values. And we talked about tribalism in a past video. And so you look at the reactions to this, and now you have a country like the United States, which I believe is in danger of some sort of civil disorder, if not a small civil war, in terms of what their populace is believing. That it's stark left, stark right, which both views are not good. There's a nice balance in the middle that creates good progress in society. And so, we live in this time, which I believe that if you maintain your sanity and you speak truth to people, which is be kind, be gentle, be forgiving of their words. We don't all have the same opinions, but we have the right to share them. And we do punish egregious actions like this. You think of this police officer in this story of what happened. Man, he should go down for murder. It's not
Oh yeah, he's already
manslaughter.
charged now for murder. I mean, that was
Oh, is he?
yeah, he's
So
charged for third degree. They'd
No,
like
I
to see
thought
him
third
put.
degree manslaughter. I thought it was manslaughter. So I get the opinions of the protesters wanting justice. I do, and I get the opinion of the narrative. But here's where it gets bad. The media takes these things and they don't tell the whole truth.
No.
They tell a version of a story. So if you looked at this cop, okay, and this got dug out, like I did a little bit of research and I tried to understand something, okay, and this cop was actually, so he knew this person from before. Okay, he knew him from before because this guy was a bouncer at a nightclub and they had previous bad interactions. So this could have been a completely like meditated thing he did and had less to do with race and like had totally to do with that personal agenda between him and this person. And so that could be a very real thing, that this guy just committed murder, right? That could be a real thing. And you think about this guy, this cop, he's married to an Asian lady, or was. She dumped his ass like right away, which was totally, the guy's like off his rocker. And you look at this whole story and the media presented it that way and presented the true narrative, then would we have riots in the street? But they just fueled the fire. They're like, oh, like, let's think hate right away. Let's mobilize people. Let's cause this. So the question is, to me, in my frame, what responsibility does the media have for like propagating this sort of message
Well,
right away, right?
yeah, and again, the problem is we don't have an objective media news source anymore. So like really everything that comes out in the news doesn't matter what. I mean, and again, what happened was bad. It was a horrible, egregious thing.
Use
And
my words, yeah.
and yeah, I'm using egregious now. Yeah, I just learned a new word. And but but seriously, it's a horrible thing. But again, it like how many people get triggered, what fires got started because of the way. So the thing is, it's about the narrative. The people who broadcast the news are so talented at triggering people and evoking an emotional response because it gets views. COVID had a life cycle, right? Like it's like, well, okay, so COVID no more. Yeah, we got enough chaos out of that. And now we look at the actual numbers. I mean, even Tony Robbins just put out a video and it almost slams COVID into a trash can. I mean, this is Tony Robbins. Like he went and talked to the smartest doctors out there. You should look his. It's like a 13-minute video up on YouTube, and I just posted it on my Facebook as well. Just it's he's like, if you actually look at the numbers and what's going on, like there's a like right now the doctors are being paid to label most deaths as COVID. I mean, there's some crazy stuff going on that, it's the numbers we're seeing are not the real numbers. Okay, the numbers we're seeing are, there's a very likely chance that you may have already had COVID and you just didn't even know it. And so it's like it's maybe a little bit more deadly than last year's seasonal flu, and possibly more contagious. Um, but was it sufficient enough to shut down an entire global economy? And that, like what is worse, the cure or the disease? And then right out of that, like people get played out after the news, they're bombarded by that, and then it's like, oh, we've got a juicy story here, let's pump it, and they'll pump it and pump it and pump it until it just fires everybody off, and then you got another fire going. Now the problem is, like, timing sucks on this because again, the COVID thing is still actually real. You know what I mean? Like social distancing measures do work and they do need to be in place, and we can't open an economy with safe measures in place. And I'm not, again, going back to the Tony Robbins thing, I'm not completely downplaying the virus. It's a real situation. However, the numbers aren't as bad as people. They're nowhere near as bad as people thought. But you still have to be safe. But now this thing just kind of, I mean, that probably put, if we watch the numbers in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised to see some staggering spikes in the amount of cases. And so again, it's like people are running to respond to things right now, and a lot of it has to do with the way things are broadcast in the news in such a way that it triggers people. Like there's definitely a different way to deliver news in a more objective way rather than they use you have no idea. They research keywords. They study what triggers people. Like like if you've ever done any type of marketing, then you're looking up keywords. You're looking up what people are looking up so that you can make sure that when they're looking something up, that they see your product or your service or your thing, right? And now think about when you've got multi-billion-dollar news tycoon companies that, they're fed by fueling the flames, right? They're fed by creating hot subjects and getting ratings and getting views and getting ratings. And so they're it's in it for them to manipulate the world to create a lot of chaos.
Well, it's interesting. It's sensationalism and it sells. People have always been into the narrative, but at what cost? I think that we have a responsibility as especially people with great power, and I think they're ignoring it. I think that these news broadcasters are ignoring their power, their reach, the identity, and things like that, which is very difficult because if I look at society nowadays, we're moving towards a polarization of what I call free market and the polarization of a Marxist society, meaning people who are looking at socialism as the answer. And this polarization is existing in the streets now to a large degree. And you see this in places like Dallas last night, for example, where these guys almost beat people to death in the streets. The cops didn't even want part of it. Armed militias are showing up. Like, things are getting out of hand. And this is because this is not a race war. This is a socioeconomic class war going on in the United States. And what it is there's been people who have been pushed down to the bottom for so long, and they're usually certain socioeconomic classes are usually just like in Canada here. New immigrants are more difficult. It's more difficult for them. Like I'm a second generation myself, but it's more difficult when you first come to a country, and that's what happens. Right now, there's a caste warfare that's happening in the States, right? So it's the rich versus the poor, it seems. And that's what's coming out to the streets. And there's ideologies there. And when that gets to a point and people start to realize that, it gets pretty scary. Like, to me, that's the scariest thing. When you meet people who want pure socialism in the streets and then people who want pure freedom in the streets, there's the difference between a libertarian and a socialist is so far that I don't know how you can hold a country together at that point. So that's what's happening in the streets. And people may look at the tipping point being this George Floyd topic, and it costs this young man his life, to bring this to the forefront of society. But it has less to do with race and has everything to do with this divide of political ideology here. The left and the right are so far apart now that it's polarized. And is there a coming back from this? Can America rejuvenate? That's the real question. And so then people come to the second part of our title, which is riot or reform. So when you're put in a scenario, whether you're left or right, that's your choice. Whether you believe in freedom or socialized agenda of society, that's up to you. But what you choose to do with this, whether you're going to rebel that you think violent action will bring about the change that you're looking for, or whether you think reform, listening, dialogue, and political discourse will do it, that's what people have to decide now. And that's a dangerous place to be. It's a dangerous place to have to choose a side. Now, I'm always going to choose sanity because I'm a bit of a pacifist, and I don't like war, man. That's not my thing. I don't think that there's been a war fought which has brought much justice other than World War II, when there was like an evident evil in the world, which hasn't existed since. I think that the dialogue from what the West is portraying now is China's rising up as a so-called evil that exists like that. They do have concentration camps. They do terrible human rights crimes, but is it equal to that of what was happening in Germany in World War II? So we're in a weird world, Shane. And how do you keep sane? Like, we have COVID, we have polarized nations, we have the two superpowers who are about to go at each other's face because they hate each other. Like
Yeah.
that's
So,
a
I
crazy
mean,
time right
I don't
there.
even want to like. Don't get me. All I gotta say is, don't get me started on the China topic. Man, I've been watching some pretty intense reports, and it's not looking friendly. I mean, it's looking like it's going to get a little bit dicey here. I mean, think about this, right? Just like to talk about the chaos there. So in China, their propaganda machine is telling all of their 2 billion people that the Americans brought COVID. Okay. They
Yep.
don't listen to American news because they don't even have access to it unless they got a VPN. But even then, their propaganda machine is so, because they like they don't have the same, the communist China Communist Party doesn't have the same value for human life. You know what I mean? Like,
But
they torture
Shane,
people.
one step before that, people have to know that they've indoctrinated all their society since they were children. They're taught to sing songs in school like the Communist Party is so great, the Communist Party is my friend, from the day they were 3 years old or 4 years old when they're entering preschool.
Right.
They're taught these
And
things.
they're taught also, just like a lot, like, a very, so, and just to be objectively fair, okay, people in North America are also given bad stories about China and Russia and Iran. Okay, like we're given bad stories. So, like, they're
Yep.
bad. Like, those countries aren't so great. You know what I mean? Now, I have a lot of friends who are Russian, and just
Yeah.
they're just like they're just
Your
like kind of like uh
your
tougher.
wife's
Yeah,
Russian.
like they're kind of like tougher Canadians. You know what I mean? Well, they're not really. They maybe they fight a little bit more. You know what I mean? And they can handle colder temperatures, and they're tough. They're tough
Yeah.
people. But I don't see like bad. You know what I mean? And I have a lot of friends that are Chinese as well. I don't see anything bad.
Yeah.
I mean, but like
Exactly.
we're talking about governments. We're talking
We're
about like
talking
the
about
powers
government.
in
That's right.
control, right?
Government. It's
So
not
it's like
people.
our power. The United States, Canada says that those guys aren't so great. Those guys. Watch out for those bad guys over there. You know what I mean? And that's, I guess, all countries do that to some degree or another to get their citizens to have a sense of national pride. However, in Canada, we used to do the national anthem and all that kind of stuff. We used to do, like, we used to sing it. I think that's all gone now. I don't even know what they do anymore. But but in China, it's a very, 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 very strong sense of national pride, and they're told that the United States are the ones that brought it, and the rest of the world is taught right now that China, and evidence does appear that way, that China is the one that, it came from China in a market in Wuhan,
Yep.
or it was released, or it was an accident, or it was someone who made a mistake or something. But however, it was released from.
But, but but here it is. It's a clash of ideology, Shane. And like I don't blame the communist Chinese for being communist. They're communists and they're acting just like communists act. Like they're acting true to form. And
Mm.
you can't blame that's their ideology. Like just like you and I, we go to church on weekends, we're Christian, we're gonna act to our ideology. They're acting true to form. There's nothing that is unexpected. Like right now, they're marching into Hong Kong and saying, "This is ours now. We don't care about your democracy or your rule here. Your one nation, two rule system that Britain put in place for 50 years." And Britain has offered emergency passports to all Hong Kong citizens that were born in Hong Kong before the turn of the tide
Yeah.
to say, "Hey, you can come to Britain." That is not good at all. First off, this is cutting throats of everybody. Right now, I know this for a fact. Just Vancouver, where we live, okay, will be affected so tremendously. There's 200,000 Hong Kong visas that live in Vancouver alone. That is 1/10 of the population of
Are you
Vancouver.
sure about that?
Yeah, 100%. You can look that up. There's 200,000 Hong Kong visas that are Canadian and Hong Kong. They're like our sister city, okay? That is such a huge amount. So all these people are going to be flooding back to Canada all of a sudden
So what
because
that
of
means
what's happening.
is essentially real estate in Vancouver could be seeing an increase.
Potentially, they already own real estate here, Shane. You got to remember the average Hong Kong citizen has a net worth of 10 million US dollars. Okay, it's the highest net worth place on the planet, other than Singapore, I believe, and Luxembourg.
That's crazy.
So very, very high.
Hmm.
Right? So if you think about this, they already own real estate here, but they're going to be coming back and there's going to be influx, but they're going to have to leave their money in Hong Kong and the Chinese government will seize their assets. So you're seeing a tremendous loss of assets by anybody who is democratized and Chinese. They're going to lose everything. So this is very bad because it's going to close down trade with Asia. Because the way that the US did business with Asia, and most people aren't very aware of this, is they traded in Hong Kong dollars. So the Chinese government would trade their RMB, okay, which is their Chinese dollar, for Hong Kong dollars, which would be traded for US dollars. Okay, and Hong Kong was the port that allowed all the trade to happen to China. Well, if they walk into Hong Kong and they just how do you go, make it authoritarian,
Yeah.
that's going to cause complete drop in a possibility of trade with the West. And that's devastating for us, first off, because so many components are made there. We can't just switch production overnight. It's going to take 3 years to switch most production back here. Now we've started and moved a bunch to Mexico at a rate of 40 billion a month has been repatriatized to North America in some form, or South America.
Wow.
But it would still take 3 years to move all of that to westernized European nations, African nations, South American and North American nations away from China. We just can't do it. And if people don't think that this polarization, that they're not going to suffer, like if we could just figure out a way, we're different, okay? We have different ideologies, that's okay. We don't got to kill each other. We don't got to choke each other. Like we can listen. The best way to learn from someone, like I've been to China, the people there are beautiful, man. I got to spend time with them. I got to enjoy them. Yes, they have different political views, but they treated me well. It's like I've been there, I've seen it. Like they built some amazing stuff. It's unreal. It's not a people problem. It's a government ideology problem. And you got the big head of the West saying, we're losing power, we're afraid. China coming up just like a rising empire saying, we want power, we're going to take it. And when that happens, you have a polarization and it's going to hit. Now, hopefully it hits and somebody puts enough economic sanctions and there's enough unification to do it peacefully, right? That's the only hope now, is that we can resolve this conflict as a world in a peaceful fashion, where we say, where the people who agree with the West side with the West and they economically sanction the East in China, or the people who agree with China sanction the West and one of them wins, but economically, right? So I'm praying every day that that is the truth.
So okay, and that happens, but then nothing matters if there's a massive explosion of the second wave, because
So second wave of COVID you're
yeah,
talking
like
about?
if and again, you got to look at, like, they let's just play these scenarios out. So one scenario that there isn't a second wave, and then the other scenario is that there is, and they have to go back to lockdown. So there's two scenarios: go back to lockdown, stay out of lockdown. Okay, two paths. Those are the only two things that can happen in the next 6 months. Okay, so let's role play one out. One is that there's more chaos. There's more stuff. We're seeing one thing after another, getting people to violate all these things and all these massive social interactions. We're going to go through the summer. People are going to be out. They're going to celebrate. They're going to party. And then all of a sudden, let's just say end of August or September, they start seeing massive rises. Temperatures start to cool down. The disease or the virus or whatever it is spreads a little bit faster. And they say, guys, you know what? We're now scared that we're going to have a massive second wave, and we got to lock everything down for another month or two. So at that point, the entire economy goes completely sideways, or tits up, you want to call it. Sorry for, but whatever the word you want to use is, it goes
Yeah.
kaput. Now, at that point, we're basically going to go back 200 years, because a Great Depression at that point would almost be very unavoidable. And what are the standards that decide whether something, because there's still people working in the Great Depression. So what is a Great Depression? Like, what are the metrics that we measure that on?
So we will never have another Great Depression, Shane. So as I said, the level of automation and our ability to produce food is so high that our supply chains will hold where everyone's fed. There will never be the starvation, the level of difficulty. We also have quantitative easing. We're not tied to a gold standard, so we can print money to provide a certain level of sustenance, like we are now with the CERB here in Canada, with the dollars they're giving out like water in the United States, to whether it's to companies, all of this to people, whatever they call them, Trump bucks. I think he put his name on them, for gosh sakes, which is crazy. And the idea is that they will print their way out of it. Is there a limit to their printing? Well, the answer is actually no. there's a deflationary measure, right? And an inflationary measure to it. So right now, because the whole world is printing money, then it actually is deflationary because the US dollar is the only strong dollar. But when the US only is printing money, let's say they want to pay off all their debt. Let's say they have 25 trillion in debt after this, or 26 trillion. And they go, well, we like to delete that. They print 26 trillion dollars, which is within their power at the Treasury to do. They print 26 trillion dollars. They don't owe it to anybody. They increase the money supply to that point. It lowers the value of the dollar by 22, 23%, give or take. And they take that inflationary hit, but then they have no debt. So if people understand socioeconomics, that debt doesn't really matter that much in this quasi-fiat money world, there's a couple things to understand. Okay, the first is that there's no safe haven for your money. Okay, because we don't know what's going to happen. And then there's a destabilizing war with China. We really don't know what's going to happen. There's riots in the U.S. So the best thing to believe in is this. There's an old adage: when things get crazy, precious metals will always go up. Gold and silver.
Let's talk gold. I want to talk. Let's dive into gold right now. I had a friend reach out to me, and more and more I keep hearing gold's a big deal. You should get some gold. You should buy some gold. Gold's going to go 10x. Can gold actually go 4, 5, 6? Like how many x's? How many times multiples can gold go up?
Well, here's the conundrum. Okay, is gold that useful in the new world? Yes, it's a precious metal, but in the world we're heading towards, if you listen to Elon Musk at all, the things that will have the most utility will have the most value. Okay, so when we're talking about solar energy or superconductors, semiconductors, all these different things, we're looking at more valuable metals like copper and silver that have application in these technologies. There is a little gold in your smartphone and a little bit of gold in your computer, but there's much more silver and copper, right? Which people aren't aware of. They're more versatile metals. So when you look at utility, which Elon Musk is preaching from the sky, he's a very smart guy. He's saying utility is the future currency. Utility, meaning you produce something, you do something, you give a service, a product, you have something that actually has a tangible use in a machine, in a product, and something like that. Those are really, really important things. So this encapsulation that gold will 10x, I don't believe it, because I don't think it's that useful. I think gold has the old adage of being, oh, I have gold because it's a rarer metal, but it's not the most useful metal. So that's what you got to balance. I think silver and copper, I think they're going to go up. So I think
silver. I've heard silver's good too. I've heard that from a few people. That's an interesting talk. I mean, and think about this. So, is there any possibility that the U.S. dollar, over the course of time, could plummet to the point where, like a bucket of cash will buy you a bag of bread?
No.
Okay, so explain why. Because we've seen it happen in places like Venezuela. How is the United States fireproofed to what?
Yeah, so it's simple. It's the petrodollar. So there's actually exchange mechanisms. You look in general economics, okay, which is the currency of how much dollars being traded to everything else. Now the dollar is still 70% of the world trading mechanism, meaning that if you want to do trade with another country, 70% of it, I think it was 69 point something the other day, is done in dollars. Okay, so that's telling us that the currency that matters to other countries is still in US dollars. It's also known as the petrodollar, meaning if you want to trade gasoline around the world, and we're still very petro-dependent no matter what, because plastics are made from petroleum. And people have to understand that the majority of it goes into plastics, right? Plastic production. It's not burnt in an engine of a car. It's not burnt for power. It's made into industrial product, okay? That's where most oil goes, or derivatives from hydrocarbons of oil, like sulfur, for example, right? And other hydrocarbons are going into production. So that is why it's unstoppable. Okay, the United States is so powerful because it has this petrodollar. The reason that China will have such problem in the future is that they can't create a currency which will compete against the US dollar for two reasons. The first reason is nobody trusts their form of government, meaning they're not willing to store their dollars because they know they don't float their currency, meaning China could print $27 trillion tomorrow and no one would know about it. So we wouldn't know to inflate that dollar, meaning their dollar's useless against our dollar the next day, but they could cheat because they don't float their money supplies or how much they print. So it's not a floated fiat currency like everything else. Most people don't know this stuff. So the idea is that China can never compete against the US dollar. So what's our stabilization dollar? The Eurozone? Well, it can't be because they've been running at a negative interest rate. So meaning they literally will pay you to take money in Europe from the banks, meaning it's a destabilized currency. It's running in an endless debt cycle. And they just don't have the wherewithal because it's a combination of nations to print their way out of trouble. The more they print, the more they inflate quicker because they're less traded than the US dollar. So no matter what we do, the US dollar is almost inescapable. That's why. And so the theory behind, if anyone tells you different, there are some debates to antithesize that, to go against it. But have I found a good one that I side with? I don't. I think the US dollar is really strong. I think America will remain strong because it has a few advantages. It has an advantage of freedom. And when you have freedom and liberty, people will seek it. And I think that will always be the choice. And it also has really strong Fortune 500 companies which hold it together that nobody else has, and that's going to be always the embodiment of their strength.
Right.
So
bringing it back to the chaos and how to be sane in the midst of chaos. So let's just break all the different scenarios down right now. So this year alone, we've seen COVID. Now we've seen the George Floyd situation. We've seen riots and panic and protest. We've seen bad weather, flooding. We've seen an economic destruction the likes the world I don't think has ever seen before. We're seeing murder hornets. Just throwing that in there. What else have we seen? We've seen aliens. Aliens are now a thing. Like that's the whole thing. We've seen alien ships. So there seems like there's a lot of noise, right? They just kind of threw that out there. By the way, I just love that. Like right in the midst where everyone's like, in like the right at the very climax of everybody like eating popcorn, stressing out, and trying to find freaking underwear they can wear as a mask.
Shane, we all
alien
know
ships come out.
But everybody on Earth, has had an
I know
experience.
we know, but it wasn't a thing until now. They told us that, hey, by the way, like there's like flying saucers, real flying.
They've always been real. They've always been real, man.
Yeah, of course. But I also want to say Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan and a few other shows talking about aliens, and he's like, and he's swearing up left, right, up, down, left, and right that he's never seen aliens, that there is no aliens, that we've never come in contact with aliens. So maybe he just doesn't know. Maybe Elon's not in the know. But
or he's not announcing on TV because he's got government contracts with friggin' NASA.
Yeah, I mean that could be a thing too.
That would probably be big
so but chaos. So and also at the same time, people have been quarantined. Now LA and many other cities are curfew. There's literally martial law. There is social distancing in effect. People are isolated. People are alone. They're alone to watch the news, which most people don't know any better. And so they're in massive anxiety and stress. Where is sanity? What do people do to get back home? And I'm talking not home as in home. I'm talking back to a place inside of themselves and their spirit where they have some peace amongst all of this chaos. What is sanity?
Well, you asked the question. You already said the answer. It's to go deep into your spirit, your spiritual self, and how you look at that. For you and I, that's a deep belief in Jesus and being Christian. Like that's where we go. And I believe that the answer is God. There's many different people who seek God in different ways and things like that. And everyone says they have the absolute truth, right? Only in the end shall we know this, right? But we live our lives a certain way to say that. But what I say is that in times of chaos, people that don't have faith tend to fall apart.
Okay,
and people
hang on a second. I hear you. I hear that. I'm going to challenge that a little bit.
Okay.
because there's a lot of people who have faith who are also living in chaos. And so I don't think that, I think faith is an important foundational piece, but it is certainly far from the only piece needed. And I think we have to elaborate on that, because I think that if you want to find sanity in the midst of chaos, you got to have faith, but you need routine. I think a semblance of routine and not like, and let me just break down what I mean by routine. People are now out of routine. A big chunk of how they were operating their life is now gone. They used to go to work from here, they'd travel to work, they go to work, they go to break, they have their little routine at work, they come back home, they go to the gym, they do the thing, they're with the kids, they have their dinner. Now it's like, full time with the family. People went from working at an office to working virtually. People went from being able to go out and socialize to having to do Zooms and all that kind of stuff. And so because the routine of many people has been thrown off, it throws people off their kelter, whatever, off balance. Okay, and so the best way to discipline yourself into getting yourself an organized sense of sanity, amongst all of this chaos, is I think it's really important to dedicate some time to dialing in a routine for yourself. So like, if you're getting up at 6:30 in the morning, like, what you're doing at 6:30 till 7 o'clock, from 7 o'clock till 7:30, from 8 till, like, set yourself a schedule so you have a routine to flow in, so you have some semblance of structure, so that you can operate better within your life, so that you're not going to be thrown off on every single whim. Because right now, I think what happens is people have, like, their structure, their balance, their routine has been dismantled, right? And I think
So
that that's a lot of what can help trigger people, is because it's not just what you see in the news, it's not just what's going on, it's your personal state.
let me ask you a question. So do you know what is your understanding of ethos?
No, I don't. It's a word. Something with spirit.
Yeah, so ethos is actually a Greek connotation for deep held cultural beliefs, spiritual beliefs, and aspirations within those beliefs. And your ethos, this is where I think you're right. Habits are great because they produce a new ethos. The thing is what happened, our culture, our belief, the way we structured ourselves, the way we walked, the way we talked, it was dramatically changed. And when you break someone's ethos, what they think is true, what they think is right, ethos leads to ethics, okay? Ethics defined by your ethos, your beliefs, your cultural orientations. These were broken, they were shattered. You no longer can greet people, you no longer can hug people, you no longer can go on dates with people. It's dangerous. They're going to kill you. That person, if you touch them, you die. Like that was literally put in their head by the media. No, it was
Oh
though.
yeah.
Right? That was the narrative. So that narrative broke their ethos. Oh my gosh, I can't trust the world. What's going to happen? I'm so alone right now. What about the people who didn't have relationships during this time, who didn't have friends, who didn't have, their ethos was totally shattered. And they were told to fear, to run, to hide, to hope, because God knows when it's going to end. And then we have people like the Prime Minister here in Canada gets on TV and be like, this isn't going to end until a vaccine happens, which is years away. And to say things like that is absolutely irresponsible, because the ethos of an individual gives up hope,
Hmm.
because who they previously were can no longer be who they're going to be. And that aspirational ethos, when that changes, people lose their semblance of balance, or what we call sanity, because we all identify as someone in society, Shane. We all have cultural identifiers, spiritual identifiers, emotional and physical identifiers, okay? We all have these. Like one that everyone understands is a love language. We have a love language. Mine is deeds, or like acts of service, whatever you want to call it. So the idea that gets flipped upside down. What if someone's was physical touch? Oh my God, you can't touch anybody anymore, right? Like that's an intense thing to flip on its head. So now someone has to restructure their ethos, their cultural beliefs, their spiritual beliefs. Everything's flipped. No wonder people are on edge. Now, how do you get it back? Well, there's immovable things. There's things that do not change, that are wholeheartedly good and true in our mindset because we have absolute morality. And so what you have to decide when you're in that spot of wondering amongst the ethoses and trying to figure out who you are is, do you want to believe in a subjective morality or an absolute? And you got to choose your future. And if you don't know what those are, you can go look them up. But in essence, it's saying pick a side. You got to pick what you choose. And then you got to follow what that says, because you are not smart enough to guide yourself through this life. Without the wisdom of the people who've walked before here, you're doomed to repeat your histories. And that's what's happening in the United States right now. We forgot the leaders that paved the way, like Martin Luther King Jr. We forgot the leaders that paved the way, like Gandhi. We forgot the leaders that brought us this freedom, this clarity, this goodness, this together culture, these things that did this, our forefathers that brought that forward. And once you forget that, you're lost. So I ask people, like, if they're watching this and they're lost, decide what your ethos is. And if you're looking for guides, there's a lot of people out there that can help you. I always say pick up the good book. It'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm biased though, right? I'm going to throw out my narrative all the time because I believe it's held me together. When I'm down, I pray. When I'm up, I pray. When I'm sideways, I pray. Why? Because it's constant. It's always there. It's never changing. I like that aspect of something, that it's always good, never changing, always constant, always there for you.
I
So that's what I find is truth, Shane. And so that's what my ethos is. So no matter what happens around in this world I see, I smile and say, bring it on. It's all good.
So I totally agree with everything you said, and I do the same thing. But I'm also I'm very proactive, and in that and I guess I have a little bit more of an adventurous spirit, but
Yes, you do.
I like to be I like to be proactive. So in chaos, I also look, okay. So let's chart a course here. Who am I, and how do I move forward in such a way where I uphold my highest values and virtues? And in doing so, also be able to expand and enlarge my territory, right? How do I uphold my good values that my foundation, and move forward in a world of chaos? And
Hmm.
can I, by my actions, increase peace? Can I, by my actions and my the way I enlarge my territory through prayer and being steadfast and dedication and hard work and inventing and creating and collaborating, can I make an impact in this world, right? And so for example, I found that instead of worrying about getting around crowds and being afraid to get near people and worrying about social distancing, I got real adventurous, and I decided to make my own little Mad Max kit. Like for me, Sanity was learning actually how to enjoy more freedom while everyone's being told to stay isolated and quarantine and locked down. I was like, okay, well, if I got to stay inside or be outside but away from people, how can I have the most fun doing that? I got myself a e-bike, right? So I don't have to pedal so hard. If you can't get an e-bike, just pedal. I mean, I'm 38, so now I'm at the point where I get the e-bike. Okay, but if you're younger than that, go get a real bike without the electricity. But I got myself that, and I got myself some saddles, and you know what? I literally have a mobile office, and I have been having more epic adventures. Just Bentley and I, my dog and I, going out, traveling to parks, hiking up trails, mountain biking, just having so much fun, but working remotely, working differently. I was proactive, and I found that I'm more fit, I'm healthy, I feel great, I'm getting lots of sun. Um, I'm actually more proactive in the way I do social gatherings. Maybe we can't meet each other, but now because people are feeling so alone, there's also this amazing thing called Zoom. The internet, like Skype, Zoom, like social meet groups. There's apps you can use, but Zoom, they invented a really cool technology called breakout rooms. So now you can actually have a party. Like you can actually have a social party where people are hanging out online and just go to different rooms and mingling and talking and all that kind of stuff. So that I like the idea of all these new creations, but I also think that in this all this chaos, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to re-envision and reform the way we do social gatherings and entertainment. You know, like for example, restaurants are totally different now. You know what I mean? It's like you got to be a few seats away. They're going to be running at half capacity at best. Like in 2 years, there's probably like I don't know, 40% of restaurants aren't going to be around. I mean, I'm just going to shoot it out there. You might think it's about
Yeah,
fair.
or more,
Yeah.
or more. Yeah, or more.
Right.
I'd say that you're going to see a dramatic shift in how restaurants are structured, and I think that you're going to see a dramatic price increase in that. Now, you mentioned something. I want to go back. Like you threw like three things in. This is Shainism here. I got to go back.
All
I got
right, let's go.
to
Let's
untangle
unwind.
this.
Yeah, you got to have your pen handy when I'm talking.
Okay. Okay. So the one I want to unpack is Zoom rooms. So there are breakout rooms. I've used it a lot in my business. I throw in webinars, and like what I do is I give a session and then we talk about certain subjects. We break out in those rooms and bring back the expertise from those breakout rooms. So you share in like intimate little groups from large sessions and back to or into intimate groups back to large sessions. Very cool. Another thing that I help keep sanity is have a family Zoom. Like jump on Zoom with everybody in your family once a week. Brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, like everybody you got, like one big Zoom, and then do the opposite of what you normally do. So if you talk a lot less, listen to everybody else. If you normally don't talk more, because that's what you need. You need the opposite of what you typically do. You need to do your opposite, which is weird. I'm telling you to do your opposite, but it's because the people who like to talk a lot actually need to talk less and listen and really hear where people's hearts are so they can help them. And the people who don't talk at all need the most help because they need to express themselves and let us know how to help them.
Yeah.
Right? Because the person who talks a lot, you already know how to help them. that's the best part. So we do our opposite. So that's back to the Zoom room, right? And that's I think that was important. I just wanted to touch on that one, Shane, because the rest of it, like, yeah, it's all good, like sense in what we're gonna do. So I think, man, we should make this a wrap for the night.
Yeah. No,
Just
this is
because
good. So we talked about a lot of chaos. We talked about things that are going on in the world. We talked about ways to reach sanity. Oh, we're getting an echo there. Oh, now you're muted. Well, you can wrap it up, Jordan.
Sorry, I muted myself so you didn't get any feedback there, man. I know my mic was doing that. But yeah, so we talked about all those different things. We talked about, keeping your sanity in this is like just find a focal point. The number one thing is pick what you believe in. Find your new ethos, your new regular. You can do that through daily habits like Shane mentioned. You can really start believing what's there. Don't get scared of the world. The world's going to happen. Only focus on what you can control and do. There's a lot of things going on, but you can choose to be a steadfast anchor for other people and be strong, or you can choose to be part of the madness. And so I know what I choose, and I would encourage you to choose the sanity over the insane, because your results and the way people will respect you and look at you as a peacemaker, a person that's more blessed than others is what it is. I think that's important. So Shane, I'll let you close the rest up. Thank you all for being here with us.
Awesome, guys. So listen, to catch more episodes of the 667 Experience, you can now catch us on iTunes podcasts, Apple Podcast, and we're going to be up on a whole bunch of other ones as well, including Google. So any podcast forum there is, you should be seeing us within the next 2 weeks. And make sure you go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Make sure you watch all of the past episodes of the 667 Experience. And moving forward, we're going to continue to talk about six packs, six figures, and Sabbath. Guys, we're out. Have a good night.